Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that, right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So in May of 2005, so about 20 years ago, it was our school's field day, and I went over to the park where we held field day every year. I went over early to help our gym teacher, Mrs. Ankney, to do whatever she needed, whatever help she needed. And so I asked, what can I do to help? And she said, well, can you paint the finish line for the 50-yard dash and the 100-yard dash? So there's this big field about the size of a soccer field, and she had set up the cones at 50 yards and the cones at 100 yards, and she had painted the start line, but there was no 50-yard dash line and no 100-yard dash line. So you may have seen this before where it's a line painter, a manual line painter, where it's a little, almost like the size of a shoebox that has 4 wheels on it, has a can of paint upside down in it, and then you have this handle that you squeeze, and then you walk, and that's how you paint the line. And so I had never used one before, but I figured, how hard can this be? And so I said, sure, no problem. So I go to the 50-yard line, finish line, and for the 50-yard dash, and I start walking and I start painting. And so I'm looking down and I'm kind of looking back and I'm looking down and forward and looking back, and I'm just walking between the two cones, and I'm squeezing the handle and paint's coming out and I'm making a line, and I'm just doing my thing. Well, I get to the other cone and I look back, and this is the most crooked, wavy line I've ever seen. Meanwhile, Mrs. Ankney is like cracking up laughing when she comes over and sees my finished product. And I thought, honestly, that I was making a super straight line. And she's like, well, there's a way to do it. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, okay, when you go down and do the 100-yard dash finish line, just pick a spot in the distance, like look at a tree or something, and then keep your eyes focused on that tree, and then just walk and squeeze the handle and just walk. Don't look down, don't look back, just stare at the tree, don't look at anything else, and just walk. So I'm like, all right. Obviously my first attempt wasn't so good, and so I went and I did exactly what she said, and I picked a tree and I focused intensely on it, and I just walked and I squeezed the handle. And this was one of the straightest lines. I mean, it looked like I had used one of those, strings or something. And so I'm just like in shock. And of course then, my 50-yard dash finish line was the point of much conversation and friendly abuse for the rest of the day on field day. But isn't that what happens in our private schools? We are so busy looking at what's latest and loudest and what's 6 inches in front of your face, and your head's on a swivel, your head's down, you're putting out fires, you're playing whack-a-mole, the tyranny of the urgent has consumed you, and you're just, getting through the day. Okay, that's the 50-yard dash finish line, and it isn't great. But what our school really needs is someone who's looking at the horizon, someone who's looking farther than anyone else, someone who sees things sooner than everyone else. And the tyranny of the urgent makes that feel impossible. So if we're overwhelmed with everything going on around us, but what we really should be doing is looking farther down the road than anyone else at our school, how on earth can we do that? Well, on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, we are going to answer the following question. Are you running your school or leading your school? And I'm going to give you some clarity around what it looks like to run a school, what it looks like to lead a school, why school leaders get stuck running their school instead of leading their school. And then most importantly, I want you to stick around because then I'm going to give you 6 strategies to do less running of your school and more leading of your school. But before we jump into that, I just want to acknowledge again that this is a very, very difficult job that you have with all of the hundreds of decisions that you need to make every day, and then those decisions are second guessed, and then you have to keep everyone safe and increase enrollment and keep the parents happy and keep the board happy and motivate the teachers and deal with student discipline and beat last year's test scores and also come in under budget. And that just leaves you feeling tired and discouraged and stressed out and overwhelmed. And I've been there. You've heard my story about getting ulcers and burnout and vertigo and wanting to quit. Well, I've been where you are, and that's why I created Thrive Academy just for you. Because Thrive Academy is a digital course, asynchronous digital course that you can do in your pajamas when it works out for you, one lesson at a time, one strategy at a time. And I took everything that I did, the strategies, the systems that I did to go from surviving or barely surviving to thriving, and I packaged it in a digital course. And I want to help you get out of survival mode. I want to help you get back to feeling energized and happy and fulfilled at school, and that is possible. And there are almost 100 private school leaders now that have used Thrive Academy to help them go from surviving to thriving. So if this is interesting to you, I strongly encourage you to check out more about Thrive Academy, theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive, theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive. I want to help you avoid the same mistakes that I made, but more importantly is to build some sustainable systems and boundaries and productivity into your life so that you can go from survival mode to feeling like you're thriving at school. And then I just want to also give you a free gift. You know, if you're listening to this in real time, we're, a couple months into the school year. And this is when, in my experience, teachers, if they're having a challenge or if they're, it's their attitude or their performance or their classroom management or something, there's that honeymoon period when the school year starts, but then things settle down and then you start to get the email, you start to get the phone call where it's parents that are complaining about a certain teacher, or maybe the parents aren't complaining, but you're just having a lot of difficulty with their performance, their attitude, their behavior, whatever the case might be. So we all have some experience dealing with difficult teachers, but I'm not sure how effective we are when we do that. So I've created a guide. It's called the 7 Strategies to Effectively Deal with Difficult Teachers. And I know sometimes I need courage and confidence to deal with difficult teachers, but I think what we really need is a plan. And so this is a step-by-step plan. It's a PDF. It's going to give you those 7 strategies to help your teachers, your difficult teachers, improve their performance and improve their attitude. So if that's something that would help you, I think it can help you, is to grab that at theprivateschoolleader.com/difficult. That's the 7 strategies to effectively deal with difficult teachers. That's free for you at theprivateschoolleader.com/difficult. All right, so on today's episode, we're talking about whether you're running your school or leading your school. And I just want to acknowledge that it's not either or. That I'm not saying that you are going to somehow magically get out of all the day-to-day operations and the tyranny of the urgent, and it's going to be only strategic, only long-term planning, only big picture thinking and visionary and mission and things of that nature, okay? It's a mixture. But I think that the problem is that we need less of the day-to-day operations, whack-a-mole, hair on fire, putting out fires, and we need more of the long-term, long-range, strategic thinking. And so we need a shift. And so how are we going to get that shift? Well, let's first of all take a look at what it looks like to run a school and what it looks like to lead a school. So running a school is exhausting. You know that. You're in the weeds. You're managing the logistics of day to day. It's sub coverage. It's responding to student issues, emergencies, parent complaints, emails, fire drills, something wrong in the cafeteria, the food delivery for the hot lunch program didn't show up. You're chasing down tuition payments. I did that for years. Somehow, how are you fixing the copier? But you're fixing the copier. So how are you the one that's fixing the broken AC unit in the window of that classroom because it's really hot? We don't have tasks that are beneath us, okay? Because I think that if you're listening to this show, it's very likely that you're a servant leader. That's one of your leadership styles. These tasks aren't beneath us, but these tasks they're short term, they're low value, they feel urgent. Everyone else wants us to adopt their definition of urgency, but the things that I just named, they're not really moving your school forward. You're just surviving the day. And so that's what it looks like to run a school. And we all do that, okay? But what about answering the question, what does it look like to lead a school? So I think that leading your school is about culture. And I wanted to grab some words that I felt really captured this. And so I came up with culture, sustainability, legacy, direction, vision, mission. And so it's about being proactive and intentional. Running the school is about being reactive, let's face it. So proactive and intentional. You're the leader of the school, so you communicate the clear vision for your school or the clear vision for your division if you're a division head. We're prioritizing the culture for staff and students. We're building a strategic plan and making sure that our stakeholders are aligned to that strategic plan. We are preparing the self-study for accreditation with help from many others. But when that self-study and the visit happens and then we have those recommendations, we're making sure those recommendations are being implemented in our school. We're growing our team, whether it's teachers or leadership team. We're trying to adapt and innovate. We've got AI, we've got screens, we've got phones. Kids younger and younger have phones. And just, how do we handle that? What's best practice? And then just long-range planning around things like building and grounds, finance, enrollment, staff development, capital campaigns, academic rigor. The list goes on. But those are the things, let's face it, those are the things that we wish that we had more time to do. And not just when we're throwing together a board report the night before the board meeting, but somehow, some way, we wish that we had more time in our week, in our school year, to lead the school instead of just run the school. And so what are some obstacles for us being able to lead? So I titled this section, Why Do School Leaders Get Stuck Running the School Instead of Leading the School? So these are some obstacles. These are some things that keep us stuck. So number one, and this is probably the most obvious, is that our schools are typically controlled chaos. Like, our schools are very complex. There are a lot of interruptions. We're trying to keep all these different kids of all these different ages, make sure they're all accounted for and in the right place. And that's not even to mention field trips and sports. And, you've got competing priorities. Every teacher thinks his or her classroom should be the most comfortable, that their curriculum is the most important, and, that if they're a coach or whatever, that their sport is the most important. So you've got competing priorities. And then just listen to this list of stakeholders. Our schools are very complex because of how many stakeholders we have. Students, teachers, non-teaching staff, parents, coaches, board members, the director of the spring musical, the bus driver, the cafeteria staff, and the list goes on and on and on and on. School counselor, people from the intermediate unit or outside, public schools, support, the speech clinician that comes in. Like, this list is endless, just stakeholders. And so our schools are very, very complex, and they're typically controlled chaos. So that's why, I'm given a few reasons here. That's one reason why I think we get stuck running our schools instead of leading our schools. Reason number 2 is fear of delegating and fear of not being on campus. Okay, so maybe I just struck a nerve with someone listening to this while you're driving or walking the dog or mowing the lawn. Fear of delegating, fear of not being on campus. If you're afraid that things will fall apart if you don't handle it yourself, or if you're afraid that things will fall apart if you're not on campus, every minute that there's a kid on campus or that there's a staff member on campus, then I worry about how long you're going to be able to do this. And so we're not built to be able to handle that kind of a grind with those hours, with the amount of stress that's attached to these responsibilities for a long time. So if it's our unwillingness to delegate because it's just easier to do it ourselves, or whatever the reason is, the longer that we hang on to those tasks, the less our team is growing. We're cultivating learned helplessness among our staff instead of building their resilience to solve problems themselves. And then that whole thing about the fear of not being on campus, things are going to happen whether you're there or not. And confirmation bias is strong about remembering that thing that happened that one time that you were at the doctor. So what are you going to do? For the rest of your career, you're never going to be off campus. So I know that every school, every leader that's listening to this podcast, every school is different as far as the size, as far as how intense the parents are, as far as how big your team is, how competent your team is. I get it. But just in general, I think something that's keeping us running around while we run our school instead of leading the school is fear of delegating and the fear of not being on campus. Number 3, why we're stuck. Lack of systems. If you're reinventing the wheel every single day, you're going to get really tired of reinventing the wheel. If you don't have strong systems in place, there are going to be things that are so repetitive that you're doing them over and over, questions that you answer over and over again. Okay, so that's another thing that keeps us stuck. I'll talk about how to improve that when we get to the strategies. Reason number 4 that I think that we are kind of stuck running the school instead of leading the school is urgency addiction. I think that sometimes we get addicted to urgency and we get addicted to helping people. And so when you solve a problem, when you help someone, when you fix a thing, you're the fixer, right? And it feels good to be the fixer. It feels good to be the go-to guy or the go-to gal, right? You get that dopamine hit, makes you feel good, especially you're not getting praise heaped on you from the teachers or from the board. So you got to get that dopamine from somewhere. But if us constantly being the one that puts out those fires keeps us from doing the important strategic work that is ensuring the future of our school and making sure that our school is fiscally responsible and is sustainable and that our school is built for the future, then we're just hoping. We're hoping that we're lucky rather than good when it comes to the future of our school. And we can't do that. We can't do that anymore. Just a couple more reasons. And I want to shine a light on this so that you understand, well, how did we get here? Number 5 on my list of reasons why I think we're stuck running the school instead of leading the school is because I think some of us have an incorrect view of servant leadership. And so, of course, no task is beneath me. No task is beneath you. We will pick up the mop. We will pick up the rag and wipe down the tables in the cafeteria. We will, unclog the toilet. Like, there is no task that's beneath us. Okay. But no task beneath you is not equal to you doing everything. And, servant leadership, yes, serve first, lead second, make a difference. That's servant leadership. But some of us are confused and have an incorrect view that servant leadership means that we're doing everything all the time. That's not a correct view. And, I've done several episodes on servant leadership. I don't want to take the time to get into the nuts and bolts of what it is and what it isn't. I can link some of that in the show notes for you. But it does not mean that you do everything. And then finally, number 6 on my list is the hero complex. And this kind of goes along with that urgency addiction. It's you solve problems fast. You're the problem solver, you're the fixer, and it feels good to be needed. But the more problems we fix, the more that our teachers and our staff depend on us to do everything. And then they're coming to you with everything. Some of my coaching clients, they're like, I can't handle all of the questions that people come to me with that they should be able to handle themselves. And so, I get that. And we'll talk about that, in a minute, but being the hero leader, having that hero complex, it feels good some of the time, but it's not a sustainable model for you to be able to lead your school in the long term. So then I want to give you 6 strategies for running your school less and leading your school more. 6 strategies for running your school less and leading your school more. So I mentioned before that you're probably multitasking, which is awesome. I hope that you're doing that while you're running errands or taking a walk or driving to or from school. And, I mentioned 6 strategies, and it's like I'm listening, I'm walking, I'm working out, how am I going to remember this? I'll take good care of you in the show notes, theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 154. Just, listen, let it sink in, and then it'll all be there for you later. All right, for these 6 strategies, I actually have a prerequisite. I want you to suspend your disbelief for a few minutes. It feels impossible. And what I'm talking about in these 6 strategies is going to be like, yeah, right. In what world does Mark think that I'm able to do this? I don't have the time to do this. I'm barely getting through the day. Okay, I get it. I understand that. I've lived it for decades. But in order to move, in order to change, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't want to grow and improve. Sometimes we have to suspend our disbelief because leading more and being involved with the tyranny of the urgent less often feels impossible. And if you're frozen because you're staring at Mount Everest and it is so big and so much of a daunting task that you're stuck and you can't even take the first step, then you're just going to keep running it back day after day after day until you run yourself into the ground. And that's terrible. But another thing that's terrible is that I've seen schools get themselves into really bad spots because there was no one that was leading strategically, and the leader was only focused on day-to-day operations. So I just want you as a prerequisite to suspend your disbelief while we talk about these 6 strategies. Okay. Strategy number 1 is to create margin. You're not going to be able to do any of these other things that I'm talking about unless you start to create margin in your day. And I know you're thinking, yeah, right, that's impossible. Well, we're suspending our disbelief, and I want to give you some help. So I'm going to link in the show notes, episode 7, the top 4 productivity hacks for busy private school leaders. And if you listen to that episode and you do even 2 of those 4 things, and you start to do them consistently, you are going to start to create margin in your week. And even if it's a small amount of margin, you're going to be able to create enough margin to start doing the things that I'm going to suggest in the next 5 strategies. Because the total amount of time that I'm proposing that we shoot for to spend on this is about 90 minutes in a week. A block of 60 minutes once, and then a block of 30 minutes on Friday. And I'll get to that in the sixth and final strategy. Again, suspend your disbelief about 60 minutes or 90 minutes when you don't have time to go to the bathroom and you haven't eaten lunch in a month, okay? But I'm going to help you, and the help is in episode 7. Listen to it, try a couple of those things, and apply them, and you will create margin. I've seen it happen with dozens of coaching clients and with nearly 100 students who've taken Thrive Academy. These strategies work. And so episode 7 will be linked in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 154. The second part about creating margin is I want you to start asking who instead of how. Start asking who instead of how. So when something comes across, when a problem pops up, when someone's like, hey, can you blah, 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 okay? You have such a bias towards action and a bias towards problem solving that we immediately click into how. How am I going to solve it? When am I going to solve it? What resources do I need? How long will this take me to solve? And you're already starting to solve the problem while the person is asking the question, right? I'm describing you, right? Okay, here's the problem. If you just immediately click into action, you never, ever ask who. Because if you never ask who, then the answer to who's going to do this thing is you 100% of the time. So when I want, and this is going to take practice, you don't change a habit that is just something that is an unconscious response, almost like an autonomic response. You don't change that in a day or a week. But we're going to start asking who in your head, because when you start thinking about who, then it could be, okay, well, maybe it could be that person or that teacher or that person on the office staff, or the maintenance person could do that. Or let's say, just for the sake of conversation, that 80% of the time when you ask who, that the answer is still you. Okay? But that 20% of tasks, I talked before about one of the things that keeps us stuck is delegating. One of the things that keeps us from delegating is we never ask who. We just start working on the problem. And so that pause, and in your head you ask who. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it, and the more that you will see that other people can do the thing. And I want everybody at your school to go home 2% more tired at the end of the day. That's not you being a jerk. That's not you being a mean boss. But if everybody would go home at the end of the day 2 to 5% more tired, you would be a little less tired. Because I think it's important that you start asking who instead of how. So number 1, strategy, create margin. Number 2 is called schedule CEO time. And I have CEO time in quotes. I don't care what you call it. I'm calling it CEO time just to make the point, to illuminate the point for you. But 60 minutes a week. Now that could be 2 30-minute sections. It's better if it's 60 minutes. When you work on the school, not just in the school. And I'm going to say that again. CEO time is when you work on the school, not just in the school. When you put it into your calendar, call it planning, call it, I don't care what you call it. You know, CEO time might be weird because other people see your calendar. I get that. But CEO time is when you're thinking like a CEO, a chief executive officer. And so we'll get to that in a minute, but it's like, let me talk about how you need to protect this time. When this is on your schedule, and by the way, one of the strategies in episode 7 is claiming white space. And I'm going to revisit that in strategy number 6. But if you claim white space before other people claim it, you're going to have this time where you're going to work on things that are about the future of the school. But then there will be interruptions and there will be urgent things that come up and so on and so forth. I need you to protect this time like the future of your school depends on it, because it does. I need you to protect this time on your calendar like the future of your school depends on it, because it does. Now, here's the thing. Let's say that you schedule this time. You're probably not going to be sure what to do because it's been so long since you did strategic thinking or long-term planning. You'll just be like, I don't even know what to do. A couple things to help you with that. So work on something that's happening more than 1 year in the future from that date. So if this is October 17th that you're sitting down, something that's happening more than 1 year in the future from that date. Another suggestion is to look at the strategic plan of the school. It's probably been a while since you looked at it, and to just even take the time to start off by reading it. And I would recommend, if it's, let's say it's in a Google Doc, or if it's a PDF or something, is maybe print that out. If it's me, I'm printing it out and I'm putting it in a binder so I can highlight stuff and mark it up, so that then when I come back the next week during my CEO time, I can start doing some things. But you probably have to read it first. It also could be that during this CEO time that you look at the accreditation recommendations that you've been meaning to get to. It's going to take time to build this muscle, this CEO time muscle. It's going to feel awkward and weird at first, but eventually it will probably turn into the most important 60 minutes of your school week. And eventually you get better at protecting it, and it will be more natural for you to know what to work on. But I think at first you might not know what to do. Okay. Let's go on to strategy number 3. Create a one-stop shop for repetitive questions. Create a one-stop shop for repetitive questions. You're online enough and dealing with purchasing things or dealing with places that provide services, or you bought software, or you bought a HelloFresh membership, or whatever it is, that you know that from a customer service standpoint, that when you go onto the website and you try and get help, whether it's with your cell phone isn't doing the right thing or whatever, that there's always going to be frequently asked questions that are right there for you to click on and probably get your answer. And then probably after that is going to be an AI bot that's going to ask you to type in your question and try to send you multiple answers. They want to try to answer your question before you get to talk to a person. And I know that's a frustration of mine. I'm a Gen Xer and I prefer to talk to a person, but I get it. It's 2025 and we're, AI is helping with customer service for better or for worse. But my point is this: at your school, what are the questions that you get tired of answering? It seems like, people don't. And part of that is on the teachers, okay? And part of that is on the parents. And part of that is on, for not reading the email and for this and that. But it's like, how do you create a one-stop shop for repetitive questions? I'm a big believer that your one-stop shop should be in your weekly memo, and that, let's say that you have a couple of things at the top that's like what's going to happen this week with an early dismissal, or just with this assembly or whatever, okay? But I'm thinking of Carrie Ann right now in Nashville, where at the end of last school year, when she got so tired of answering the same questions over and over again, that she took the time with a couple members of her team to sit down and just get everything all together and put all the links for those frequently asked questions in the same place that's easily accessible by the teachers. And so I'm talking about a link to the student handbook, a link to the employee handbook, a link to the maintenance request Google form, a link to the IT request Google form, bell schedule, grading scale, team roster, who's in the band, all of that stuff. Yes. Does it take time up front? Yes. Are there other people that you can bring to the table to help with some of that low-hanging fruit to get that all organized? Yes. If you're listening to this in real time, the school here has already started. That's not ideal to try to find time to do this, And this could be a thing where you just start a Google Doc of frequently asked questions, and then at the end of the school year, you create your one-stop shop with all the links. But your teachers should not have to go on a scavenger hunt to find information, because they're just going to ask you instead. And then that's going to frustrate you. And they're going to stop reading emails when they get so many emails. And so what we really tried to do at my most recent school, and we actually did a pretty good job of it eventually, was to have all of those things in the weekly memo and have it easily accessible. We obsessed over making sure everything was accurate as far as the sports schedule and the early dismissal and the team rosters, and here's where you click to go to the portal for ADP to ask for time off. Like, all of it is in one place. So a way that you can do more leading and less day-to-day running of your school is to create a one-stop shop for repetitive questions. Okay, that brings us to strategy number 4, and that is to use the focus funnel. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I'm going to refer you to the show notes and episode 141, where I did an episode on the focus funnel. This is Rory Vaden, who wrote the book Procrastinate on Purpose, came up with the focus funnel. And the idea is that when there's a task, you ask yourself, can I eliminate it? If the answer is no, can I automate it? If the answer is no, can I delegate it? And if the answer is no, then you have to decide, am I going to do it now, which is concentrate, or later, which is procrastinate? And if the answer is later, then you take it and you drop it in at the top of the focus funnel again. So I did an episode on that. I'll link it in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 154. And I'm telling you, the focus funnel is a framework. We don't have enough frameworks in our private schools, and private school leaders don't have enough frameworks. Maybe you're the exception. Maybe your school has all kinds of SOPs and all kinds of systems, and your one-stop shop is a sparkling centerpiece of accurate information in your school. Good for you. Congratulations. That's amazing. But in most schools, it's a mixture or it's a mess. And so the framework of the focus funnel for you to just pause and think about your tasks before you just do them all. If you don't prioritize or think about, like, this task is more important than that task, then everything on your to-do list is an 8 out of 10 and it's due before the end of the day. And that's just not true. So we need to have something that kind of sorts it, and the focus funnel is really good at that. So again, trying to help you with that, use the focus funnel. And then 2 more quickly. Strategy number 5, appoint an internal mini director of operations. And I know that's a mouthful, but I'm doing it for a reason. So you might say, well, our school, we're way too small, or we don't have a team where we have a director of operations. Okay. Then that's why I said mini director of operations and internal. And so whether we're identifying an admin or an office staff member, or we're going to stipend a teacher to work on some of this stuff during his or her planning period, you're like, well, we don't have money to do that. Okay. Or you could just keep doing everything forever. I'm serious. And so what are we talking about? A person who needs to own some of the daily operations of the school, sub coverage, field trip forms. Why are you chasing down money and permission slips for field trips? Parent logistics, facility issues, IT issues, like systems, Google Forms, but a person has to own that. And I put coverage in all caps with an exclamation point. Coverage was the bane of my existence, and that was especially true in the 4.5 years after the pandemic started, before I retired. Oh my gosh, coverage sends a chill down my spine. And then people leaving early and this and that. And it's like, it is, and not just figuring out the sub coverage, but let's face it, you and I covering classes. There goes, you take that call at 5:45 in the morning, and it's like, you had your day planned, but now you're teaching kindergarten, or now you're teaching phys ed all day. Okay. I understand. I've lived it. And every school is different. I know your situation is different, but I'm telling you, you're going to be stuck in this running the school, playing whack-a-mole with your hair on fire, putting out fires for the next 5-10 years. That's a recipe for burnout or worse. So get some help, identify a person internally, or, in a long-term situation, figure out, okay, is there a need here at our school with the size that we are? And here's the last thing I want to say on that, and then I'll wrap it up with number 6. I coach a lot of clients who their school grows. I coach a couple clients who their school has doubled and their team size has stayed the same as far as at the leadership level. And then it triples, and that that might be you that I'm talking to. We've got to not only investing in the kids isn't only investing in curriculum and teachers. Sometimes it's adding someone to the admin team in a very much needed role. And I think an underrated, underused role is someone that's handling operations. And then finally, number 6, strategies to run the school less and lead the school more is to schedule 30 minutes on Friday afternoon for strategic prep. Schedule 30 minutes on Friday afternoon for strategic prep. So I don't know about you, but I'm not highly productive on Friday afternoon. But a way to be proactive and not reactive is for 30 minutes on Friday afternoon is to get your Google Calendar out. I talk about this in episode 7 that's linked in the show notes about claiming white space. Plan out your week. Claim that 60 minutes of CEO time. Schedule in pop-ins. Schedule in some of the other things that are your good intentions. Continue to build margin, but that 30-minute Friday afternoon strategic prep, it's also going to let you have a better weekend because you're going to close that loop for the week and have a good plan for the start of the week. It also will reduce your Sunday night scaries. There's about 3 wins when you take that 30 minutes on Friday afternoon for strategic prep. So what are our big takeaways? So the 6 strategies for running your school less and leading your school more, the prerequisite is to suspend your disbelief that any of this is possible. Number 1, create margin. Number 2, schedule CEO time 60 minutes a week so that you can work on the school and not just in the school. Number 3 is create a one-stop shop for repetitive questions with links. Number 4, use the focus funnel. Number 5, appoint an internal mini director of operations. Number 6, schedule 30 minutes on Friday afternoon for strategic prep. And your call to action is in the next week. When you get to Friday, do your 30 minutes of strategic prep. And then when you're doing that 30 minutes of strategic prep and you're planning that following week, is to put that 60 minutes of CEO time in. Even if you start with 30 minutes, but start. Please start. And just another quick reminder, I mentioned about Thrive Academy. All the things we talked about in today's episode, there are strategies and systems in Thrive Academy that will change your life at school and change your life at home. Check that out at theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive. And then a final reminder about this free PDF guide called The 7 Strategies to Effectively Deal with Difficult Teachers. You can grab that at theprivateschoolleader.com/difficult. I'd love to hear from you. My email is mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. And I've already mentioned the show notes, privateschoolleader.com, episode 154. And if you would be willing to share this episode with another leader or a rising leader at your school, I'd really appreciate it. And I've been your host, Mark Minkus. I just want to say how much I appreciate you and the amazing work you're doing at your school. And thank you so much for taking some of your precious time to join me here today. And I'll see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.